Ah, I see you've got the fire going. Lovely. I've reset the traps outside, and Jasper's done a fine job of boarding up the windows.
Yarp!
Now there's only one way in and only one way out.
Yarp!
I have a feeling we'll be receiving another visitor tonight. Keep that crossbow by your side. It might be the only weapon we have that can penetrate the beast's hide.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the LARP Noobs. And this time, well, first of all, we should say Happy New Year, actually.
Yes, Happy New
Year. And as always, I'm joined by Dave.
Hello.
And we're going to today be talking about a special event that you attended, which is a strange thing to say, given the current times and situations, because this was a digital event.
It was it's LARPing over Zoom, which is like, I'll tell you what, right? So I heard about this from Daniel, who's a friend of the podcast. He basically messaged me about this group, and basically I think what he said was it was a bit like Nightmare. Do you remember the like 80s, 90s TV show Nightmare, which we'll reference a lot during this? So let me just break down what the show was. A fantastic show, wasn't it, Ian? Where a group of young adventurers were taken off to a castle where a dungeon master type character would greet them in a creepy way, and he would have an assistant that was like
it changed over seasons, but like it was a faun and a genie and all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah. So the basic gist was that one character would, one of the players would don a helmet, which basically gave them no vision, and the other players would observe that character and give them instructions as they went through this kind of virtual world. So they kind of was like this. They were kind of watching a screen essentially, which was their portal into this kind of, and us as a viewer's portal into this kind of alternate reality. It was kind of like really early augmented reality stuff, essentially.
Yeah, so I assume it was a lot of green screen, and like they had like actors dressed up with very limited props and very limited graphics, but it did the job, and it was the stuff of little boy Dave and little boy Ian's like fantasy. It was the best.
It was super cool. It was super
notoriously hard as well. Like the idea of like someone completing Nightmare was the stuff of legend. Like you got to, because there's no on demand stuff then, right? So if it happened to be on TV when you watched an episode where they actually made it, then that was. I mean, wow, that people didn't believe you if you said you've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, so I think it's kind of like that, but it also, I mean, this is something that I know a huge amount about, so you're going to be mainly talking about it. But am I right in thinking it also sort of harks slightly to those Atmosphere board games, which used to come with those cassette tape that would be like, they'd kind of like the guy would sort of say stuff to you and you'd have to do things. Is it kind of like that?
Let me explain what.
Yeah.
Let me go through it, and then we can kind of draw our own conclusions. I've done one session. Mm-hmm. I had spoilers. I had a blast. Right, I had a really good time doing it. Basically, I'd heard about it. I joined the Facebook group, and I'd kind of looked at a few dates and couldn't go on a couple of different ones. But then there was one on the 30th of December, and I was like, hey, I'm in tier 4, so it's not like I'm going anywhere, right? So I was planning on going somewhere over that time, but because I was in tier 4, I was like, oh man, well, might as well, right?
We should say for international listeners, tier 4 is like pretty much full lockdown here in the UK, or as full lockdown as the UK is at the moment with weird wackiness going on.
Yeah, let's try and not talk about COVID too much, but it's me stuck in my flat basically, and that's what's been going on for a very long time now. So let's see if you can judge the sanity of both our voices, whether we've changed a lot or not. But basically, I signed up for it. It was a tenner, which I thought was like, even if it's shit for a tenner, it's worth a pop, right? Like that's a very low. I don't know, for me anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you sent a post to me, and it was one of those things where I hadn't really had a chance to sort of check and get the time and stuff. But like, I'm interested, and I think the price point is right.
I think the price point is right too. Right now,
I mean, obviously you'll have to. Now. Yeah, you'll have to tell me obviously when we get to production, and I assume there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll go through kind of my experience, and we'll kind of explain as we go, like what a few of the layers behind this glorious onion that I encountered. So basically, you buy a ticket. With the ticket, you get given a link to a Zoom call. You basically just have to. So I messaged the guy that was running it, a guy called Ollie. He was really pleased that I was going to come. Very friendly guy. You get given like a list of archetypes for your character, right? Oh, I should say the setting is like 18th century. It's based on like European like folklore and grim tales, right? So that's the sort of world that we're in here. So
just as a brief question, because looking from the website, which is like the Facebook page, am I right in thinking that it has? Is there like one fixed genre, or are there multiple different genres? Or
at the moment, and this is anything I say here take with a complete caveat. I've played
classic.
one session, classic, So
everything we say is potentially wrong.
Absolutely, and it's your own fault for listening to this podcast if you want fact.
You know
what I mean? Like we don't deal with that here.
Facts optional.
We're not journalists. We're a bunch of idiots with microphones. So
you knew what you signed up for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I think it all exists, from my understanding, in the same world, right?
Okay.
So, and that's expanding. So the lore to the world is something that is kind of like in play right now. So different elements are being explored and characters are being introduced and things like that.
And for those interested, we should probably say this is StoryMaster's Tales Online LARP. Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
If people want to sort of follow along and look at the page and stuff and get information about it, that's the place to go. I've had a very brief look because I wanted to kind of enter this with kind of like you, the listener, kind of level of knowledge, so I could quiz Dave.
I feel like StoryMaster's Tales is like a really 90s title for a thing, right? Like, I don't know, it makes me, there's nostalgia to it for me. I don't know, like in layers on this. So
there used to be a TV show actually, which is called The Storyteller, or I think I've got that right. And it was essentially it's
so good.
It was so good. But it was
that the one where they had like Jim Henson stuff in it?
Yeah, and also they did multiple different techniques. I think they even did a remake of it. But yeah, I think it kind of harks back to that kind of thing slightly from the visual aesthetic vibes I'm getting.
Do you know what? I'm starting this and I'm already like, am I just really into this because of nostalgia? Am I being completely? I don't think I am. But let me continue.
But isn't there a little bit of that involved in all LARP? To be honest, like a little bit of like you desiring the project of play, right? Is nostalgia in itself to a certain degree.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a fair. I think that's fair. So you buy your ticket, you receive this Zoom thing, message to Ollie, you get given all these archetypes. So there's a whole bunch of different archetypes, like D&D galore, including a few like extra ones, right? And some of the extra ones were like pirate, and I was like, well, I've just been doing D&D, and I just discovered I have a sweet pirate voice, and I want to use it more, right? Like so. Because one of my characters ate a magic mushroom and temporarily got turned into a different character, which was a pirate, and then I was a pirate for a bit, and it was amazing.
It was super cool. It was really good. It was really good.
So I was feeling kind of confident going in that. I was more like, let's see if I can do the accent for a whole session, right? Like that was my main objective to do it. But and he was.
To give a ballpark, how long roughly is the session? I mean, do they give you like a cue to that going in?
So it started at 5:30 p.m. and it went on until about I don't know. God, that's weird. I've got no concept of time.
I think it was about 8 or 9 when you kind of were talking to us about it briefly.
It was. It's maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. Like we waited around afterwards and we spoke for about half an hour, probably.
Sure, just to give people a ballpark, right? Of what?
Yeah, I'd say an hour and a half to 2 hours is something about that ballpark. I could be wrong on that.
A feature movie length kind of thing.
Yeah, almost. Like it's a fun evening. It's a fun evening, right? Like that's how I kind of view it, right? It's like your evening activity or whatever, you know. So basically, I got dressed up in all my LARP kit. As well, not all my LARP kit, just the piratey type stuff.
Yeah,
and basically
you pulled off the aesthetic, right?
Set up the webcam. You change your backdrop. So you know, Zoom has like you can change your backdrop to be like blue screened onto something else.
Oh yeah, and I think it just does it digitally for you, doesn't it? And just
it's pretty smart. It's a bit raggedy
Yeah.
around the edges of a person.
You've actually got a green screen as well, haven't you?
Well, I've got the makings of a green screen. I wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
But so basically, I found a ship docked in the Caribbean type fantasy D&D type image for my backdrop, basically, and I stuck that on behind me, and there I was, ready to go, rum in hand. Let's do this. So
nice.
Basically, it was coming up to 5:30, and I joined about 5-10 minutes early, and you're basically met with like a wall of people, right? And everyone's like chatting icy.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh snap! Like we're in. Do you know what I mean? Like I just felt like literally like I'd wandered in, right? And it was like, this sounds like, oh no, how off-putting. But honestly, it was cool. Immediately listening to people talking, like people really are. There's some cool characters out there and kind of fun people that you want to kind of, and there's all these little bits of lore that you're picking up by hearing them discuss certain topics. So I quite enjoyed just kind of hanging out.
Functionally, how does it work with all of the different voices? I mean, because how many players basically, and how many different voices are firing at the same time? And are there separate rooms that you go to and things like that?
There were 12 players and one DM. Okay, so one DM seems the actor, master. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that didn't. I know it sounds like a lot, 12 people, but it didn't feel too much, right? Like I was quite happy just to fire in. I can be quite talkative and annoying in D&D because I tend to hog the room a bit. So I'm very conscious just to shut the hell up occasionally and just let other people talk or try and like feed other people into game. But I actually found it not that bad at all, really, for the entire session. Ever so often there'll be a slight moment of people speaking over each other excitedly, but then that would kind of simmer down and people would give each other like the spotlight, you know?
I mean, do you find as well, like having and this is something we've learned through playing D&D, actually, having webcams and having therefore visual cues does help a lot with that sort of social thing, because obviously there's that natural delay that happens over, Zoom or Discord, whatever it is that you're using.
I would say this is slightly different because the way I had my screen set up, I had a big screen of the channel that Ollie, the Games Master, was actually streaming out. So I had that big, and on the right hand side, I had all the players. And whenever they spoke, they'll pop up into that list basically, so I could see them. But that does also give you visual cues anyway. And I think it was like I don't know. My group had a really nice dynamic. Cool. Like there were different people that were kind of like different levels of conversation, and I don't know, everyone let each other talk. It was a really nice experience, basically. It was a lot like a kind of like by the end of the session, if you ever played like a D&D session for the first time and you feel like a group coming together, that sensation, whatever that is, I started to feel that by the end of this like little adventure that we'd had. Like you start to know characters and interact with them and have mad battles.
I mean, it's getting into that kind of groove of cooperative storytelling, right? Rather than just espousing your own narrative for the sake of you. You can start to enjoy the kind of the college of the collective, as it were.
Very much so. I think there's like almost immediately that was like when you start presenting your character, people want to interact with that character. And I think like with any good role play, like your character shifts and changes because you're being questioned about who they are, right? Like so my character is called Charlie, and Charlie's a bit of a rapscallion. And like I was still Aztec or whatever, you know what I mean? Some spooky dookies along his he's seen stuff, you know?
Ghost pirate.
There was an element of undead, and I was like, at one stage, like, it'd be a lot harder to kill a dead man. and once he sent me a few photos. Now,
Right.
the photos he sent me a tiny little bit of text and some photos, right? I've put that in your on a notepad because it's like a pin in it, because the photos were good, but I only really looked at, there were 4, and I looked at one specifically that was a character. So I really focused on the character because I was like, I must remember, if I see this guy, I know him, right? So that was my thinking behind it. I didn't pay a big enough attention to the other photos I got sent. Okay, so anyway, right? So this is all I'm armed with. We go in. So then everyone's chatting in character. I introduce myself. People are very friendly. We're talking a little bit about ourselves. You know, I was asking questions about the nature of the world or who whatever, and people were talking about all sorts of cool stuff because there's a lot of different classes.
As another question, sorry, just the storytelling device that we're kind of setting up here that you're all communicating with, is the idea that you're sort of all looking through some kind of astral mirror collectively or something? Or
kind of, yeah. So 5:30, okay, boom, window opens up. It's a fucking wizard, Ian. It's a goddamn wizard, Ian. We're talking like white beard, white long hair,
nice
wizard, right? And the guy doing it, the Quasimor the wizard, Ian. Okay, and he's our like dungeon master, who's like the benevolent, all-knowing character that's coming in to help us out, and he was kind of like old and nice. I loved it immediately, right? And everyone was like asking questions about him. And basically, to answer your question, we were in a sort of time like bubble where we had, and this was the idea of us moving through these different scenes and areas that we're stuck in time or having been grabbed by another power, and now we're being helped by Quasimor while going through this journey, right?
Looking at the website, it kind of sells that vibe that there's these kind of different people pulled out, almost of different dimensions, and sort of drawn together. Am I kind of correct in thinking that?
Kind of. I think I think there was a common law about the area that we lived in. Like I might have been to a pub called the Merry Pig, right? And I've done some gambling there, right? So we were from the area, but I think there's a lot of kind of like you can put that down to like there's another power that's brought us in or whatever. I don't know. You can.
They've got a device to sort of bring you guys together, and
I'd also say it's a lot more. It feels looser than that. It feels a lot more kind of like fill it with imagination if you want, right? Like that's if you want to ask a question, we can have fun exploring it together. You know, it's good. So Charlie was obviously a bit out of his element, not really knowing anything about this sort of carry on. So he had a few questions to ask about what was going on. And but I should say, so the wizard is in a set, right? Like a proper studio set, right? So he's at a table with props, and there's a stone wall behind him, lighting. The whole, I mean, it's cool, right? Like it's really nicely done. Then we get basically set a task. I don't want to go too much into exactly what happened because they might run this story again, and I don't want to ruin it, right? So there was a basic gist of what we're going to be doing, and we were told basically there was a kind of a risk of death at the end of this because we were going to potentially be put down into a dungeon. Okay. Right. And I'm gonna do some spoilers. So if there's out of time people that are going to do that, I'll try and be vague. But if you don't want to know anything about it and you've been interested this far, the website will be in the description. Just go to it now. So I might drop minor spoilers or major spoilers depending on how excited I get while telling the story. So spoiler warning done. Let's move on. Ian. Okay, so we've been told that we've been zapped across, and there's like different forms of magic spiraling around us or anything. And one of those is necromancy, right? You don't want to fuck with necromancy, right? Like that's always bad. So everyone's a bit concerned, and we're told that we might potentially die in this. So we're basically going to be dumped off in this dungeon, and we're going to have to survive. But before we get there, we have to try and find allies or people that can help us.
Okay.
So we're then sent off to like there's a teleporty, and then we go through and we get to another screen, okay? And this is like a translucent old woman with a haggard face, And she's like this weird witch type woman, and she's like a spirit.
This is another actor, or is this a player?
This is what I only assume is the same actor. Just between these transitions, he's like changing all of his outfit. Yeah, like a full Kylie Minogue change. Do you know what I mean? Like completely, and then sets out, and there he is as this thing. Yeah, very impressive, right? So then we're all like talking among ourselves, and she's there moving around. Anyway, she's like this wise woman or whatever called Ursula, right? And she's in her astral form because her body is actually sleeping by the fireplace, and she doesn't want to wake her up. So we're speaking to this other version of her out of her body. Yeah, that's a sort of like, mwah. That's a lovely touch, isn't it? Right? Instead of just going to see the wise woman, she's out of her body and doing weird crap, right? We have a conversation with her about things. Okay, I decided that I would use an old tactic to try and gain friends, which is to use a little bit of charm, Ian. A little bit of charm, just to, help things along.
And
so I might have...
Sorry, and I guess this is probably a good point to ask about game mechanics in terms of are there is it just full on LARP, or are there skills, or is there anything like that, or is it there's no dice, there's no things like that, you have to RP everything out?
No, so it's RPing, and it's kind of led by people in game, and it's about decisions that are made, right? So I will be giving examples because it's hard to tell this without really giving good examples, right? So in this case, I was basically I said some very nice compliments in a little bit of a flirtatious way to the old lady, and then she started to like us a bit. Okay, so she helped us out a little bit, and it was a good time. It was a fun time. And then so all the different characters that we had like have their own specialty, right? So some of them are like sorcerers or alchemists, or who else was there? Like a ranger was there, right, with a bow, and people like this. We can't take anything out of the world, or we can't give anything to the world, right? So say if you sit there with, I've got this gemstone sat next to me, I'll give this to them. It's like, well, I can't take anything from you, right? Right. There were ways to gain items in the game, and there were ways to, I assume, to use those items that we had gained in the game, right?
Sure.
So,
and say for you as a pirate, do you have is there a skill set or anything like that, or items that come with that?
No.
Is it just purely an RPing platform?
I think it's not purely RPG. I get the feeling that some people do have golds, because that was mentioned. I'm not sure about this, but like some people have gold, so I'm assuming there might be some items that people might have, or things that bestow on them at some point, but I didn't see any of that in this.
But there's not like a loadout, so like the ranger with their bow, it's not like by virtue of being a ranger you have a bow kind of thing.
The way I took to it was thinking, how would my character, Charlie Aitken, the pirate, approach each of these problems, and how would he solve them? Is how I thought about it in an RP way, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to talk to Ollie about a lot of these points, actually. But anyway, let's start off like we usually do, not knowing much about it, and then trying to sell it to people, and then like see if they like it. So, but it's dope. Right. We then, after the old lady, we then get moved on to another section, which I won't spoil too much about. But we met a troll type figure. And he was like, but it was all video stuff, so that he'd gone out and shot video and put that on loops. And then when we would talk, he would voice over the creature speaking to us, which was really, really awesome. We had to get past him. In order to do that, I told a story.
Okay.
Right? So that's an example of like, I think of how you approach problems in this. Like, I was just like, well, why don't we use a story? It was like a Fey realmy type thing. So I was like, well, in my culture, occasionally we tell a story as payment, so that was the idea of trying to do that. So I basically had this idea for a story for Empire, and I was like, it's still so rough in my head. And basically I blasted out a very rough version of that story, and everyone was really, really nice about it and really complimentary and very, very cool. And that worked in getting us onto this next section, which was
That's cool.
Yeah, really fun, right? So I feel like as with D&D and with LARP, right? Like putting your all into it can often be rewarded, right? Like, but at the same time, you should obviously always don't be a dick and let other people talk, and don't just hog it. But after that, we went into another area where there was this crazy looking outfit, right? Like a like Eldari, elvish, fey creature, and we chatted to them. And man, I don't want to give spoilers, but like one of our party, Ian, didn't make it out of that area.
Wow. Okay.
So
death is a very real possibility then, isn't it?
It's not so much death. It was
Okay.
kind of like, it was a weird, like,
Sure.
There was some back and forth, decisions were made, and then someone stepped up to the plate, and then they were taken, Ian. So that's like one aspect of it, which I find, like, I love that. And also the kind of the weight of responsibility that you get at LARP sometimes, because you're doing it for real, right? There's the pang of real adrenaline and fear and response that comes into certain situations. Like I had a few of those while playing this, and I think that's a really good sign about.
Yeah, that's nice.
Because it's Zoom, that can get broken down sometimes. You can really get some immersion through playing the game, So that's one thing I'll say about that.
Mechanically as well, like in terms of like that player no longer being present. I mean, no spoilers, but is the player still able to engage in the rest of the game, or are they essentially out of the session at that point?
That's a very good question. I don't know because I didn't speak to them.
Okay.
From my point of view, they were external. I don't know what that means for them. I don't know what it means for the game. I don't know I don't know any of that, right?
No, sure.
All I would say is that in the kind of deep, everyone was happy. Everyone was really stoked with what had happened. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means for future sessions with that character or whatever that means. So I don't know. And then basically after that encounter, which I'd love to go into more detail, but I won't. Basically then we came to the end screen, because that was the end of the session, right? Like because we were about to go into the dungeon we had gained like something that was going to help us for the dungeon section, which became a physical item in the world that we were watching, by the way. So when we gained Quasimor actually had the items. That was a nice little touch of like, I have been given this and we'll use this to help you type thing. Like
that's nice.
Very cool, dude. Like Ollie was very apologetic about technical difficulties that he had. I enjoyed it a lot. Like I think there's a danger when you're doing RP and things like this that 10 minutes where you're kind of like, when you're a dungeon master, right? And you're tough. And you're like, oh man, I'm padding this out and I haven't got this ready, and the players are all talking among themselves while you're panicking, looking through notes. From the player's point of view, they're sat there happily RPing for 10 minutes with the rest of their party and are oblivious to your panic, right? So like from my point of view, I just really enjoyed interacting with the other people. I should say the other people are like, there's from obviously like the United Kingdom and Ireland, but there are Americans there, or North Americans, I should say. I don't know whether they were Canadian or not, but I get the feeling that there'll be, and there might have been some other nationalities there as well, but it's a very international affair. And that's one thing I really like about it, that people are kind of from different communities are kind of coming together and like learning to LARP together. I think that's, love it.
I think from what I saw, there's actually a number of different time slots as well. So there are time slots that may work better with your time zone restrictions. Obviously.
Yeah, I think 5:30. Yeah, I think there was an afternoon session and evening session sometimes. You'd have to check all this.
Yeah, and I think it opens doors potentially to people who are in different time zones to have, more optimum slots that they can actually engage in.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. I mean, like we'll move past the game now, and we're just going to talk about some of the kind of theories, that stuff that are exciting me about this as a concept and the way that Ollie's running it. So from what I understand, Ollie does run a theatre, which is based on more like an interactive theatre. So small groups would go there and they would do small performances where there would be like, not like an escape room, but like a puzzle game or an RP session or something, right? And I really like this idea, by the way, of having like professional actors dressed in all the kit, pretending to be characters, maybe playing with children or families or groups, right? I think it's I like that idea, whatever. But because of COVID, he was kind of stuck. He couldn't do that anymore, right? Because you can't have any groups and you can't have it. It's just not safe. So his idea was to then take those expertise and move them to this arena of doing LARP online. And I think it's fucking genius. I think it's such a good idea. So basically, from what I understand, he's using OBS, which is like a streaming program. Basically, what it allows you to do is create a virtual camera, which you can tell Zoom, this is my output, but effectively you can put what you like onto that, right? So you can change different scenes, you can go to different cameras, you can do different effects. There's lots of different stuff you can do in OBS. And he's basically using that to drive his whole show. So he's using video, he's using live performance, he's using these awesome sets. He's got a whole bunch of really cool costumes that he's got ready to go, different characters. And I think like at the moment, the limitations are there's only one of him, right? But I think there would be ways to have potentially multiple groups happening at the same time, potentially their things, what they do, interacting with each other. Discord might be interesting, I think, to work on that, maybe with the multi-room function. I don't know.
Yeah, I think multi-rooms might work quite well. And also the idea of having, you can have multiple game masters. And obviously once COVID restrictions do ease up, of course, then it opens opportunity for potentially more individuals being in the same room and things like that.
Do you know what it reminded me of? And this is quite a personal thing, Ian, but I'm going to bring it up now anyway, because this is what it reminded me of. When we were like early teenagers, right? We created a game for your birthday where a whole bunch of me and my friends ran out into our village and we all had to like pretend to be different characters, and you had to work out this like mystery that we'd set up for you around the village, and you ran off. It was night and it was madness and chaotic, but that's what it reminded me of. That kind of like boyish excitement of kind of like getting into a really fun, like imagination filled session. I think that's one thing that I highly praise Ollie for, is giving this impression of a much wider world with lots and lots of possibilities. Like when we came through those teleporty bits, what the hell were we going to find, right? That was what was exciting about it for me, was to be presented with these unique and fun environments to interact with,
I think that's a really cool idea. And I think, as you say, it does open up a lot of opportunities for things. And also, different genres. Like you could easily do a sci-fi version, traveling to different planets.
A noir detective one. Massively.
You know what I mean? Like you could easily do Starship so-and-so and you're all like pilots of different starships or whatever in some kind of rinky-tink world.
You're in a bar and someone gets killed, right? And you have to work out who...
All that kind of stuff.
And I think that I think this is why I'm so excited about it, because there's a level of professionalism from the performance and the props and all that stuff that I really feel is like very, very good and gives me a lot of confidence in this going forward. So yeah, I think I also would be curious to see what happens post-COVID with this as well, whether it would expand, because I think it's something, I think as a nugget of an idea, it's really, really, really got a lot of potential. Well,
I think also being able to combine it like with the thing is as well, you can do like both, right? You can do hybrid systems where you can have these kind of things with the idea of maybe you have friends over, you all meet up at someone's house in groups, and maybe you are the crew of a starship, and maybe there is a thing going on, and it's not got the same restrictions that say a COVID environment puts on, and you can still do all of this stuff. Who knows, right?
I think I'm sure people are. I've seen on the Facebook group people posting letters, like IC letters and things like that. So I think there's something nice about this, like lineage of LARP coming into this. That there's a few kind of like the world is continuing outside of the game, and those characters. Like there's one character in there who called Robert, who kept throwing me under the bus, right? He just kept on like... It was hilarious. It was hilarious. It was just... And it was like, at the first one, I was like, cheeky motherfucker. You know what I mean? But the second time, I was like, how dare you, sir? And all this stuff and outrage and just... Everyone's having a really good time, It's like, it was a really nice little group. And what's kind of interesting is I think there's a couple of different, I don't know how many players there are at the moment 50 maybe. I don't know, but they're kind of rotating in and out, so it's going to be a different bunch of people that you roll with each time, I think, most of the time.
I mean, I was going to ask that as a separate question. So there's no pressure on you necessarily attending the next one in order to go into the dungeon, for example. You've chained the key so that other people can potentially go into the dungeon.
Dude, annoyingly, the next session I'm working both nights.
Right.
So actually, I start work when the session ends at 8 o'clock, basically. So I actually have to be at work at 8 p.m. to get. So, dude, it's what it is.
It is what it is.
Dude, 100%. Like, I work shifts, it's fine. But yeah, it is like I was genuinely excited to see how this crew go. There is a part of me, obviously, that is like, well, thank God I'm not going in with those guys. They're all going to get themselves murdered down there, you know. So, you know. Better skip that one out, you know. But who knows what Charlie's been up to while everyone else went down the dungeon? Maybe he got zipped off to another place or did whatever, you know. It's kind of, it's fun, and it's the imagination side of it is something that I just think is fantastic. So yeah.
Well, I think for you as someone, because obviously you've got a background in TV and sort of more kind of production side stuff as well. It must kind of, for you, I think, like fire a lot of kind of possibilities when you think about what it can be.
Definitely, and it made me kind of see like I'm not. This isn't me signing up to do it, but like with enough organization and the right people doing the right bits, like you could do something really multi-layered and really fun. I think of this. Like what's happening now is totally worthwhile, right? For like an hour and a half, 2 hours, going out there and actually having like an absolute blast with a whole bunch of random people, a very professional actor giving you these great scenes. It works. But then my little nerd starts kicking in. I'm like, world building and different groups, and you could have different villages that have like they operate separately to each other, and different characters can maybe visit from one place to the other or whatever. Lots of ideas.
Cover each other. Yeah.
I do like the idea of a spaceport, though. That's another fun idea. Like the different genres, like you said. Yeah, a lot of cool ideas. So honestly, I wish all the best to them, and I really hope that they continue to have success. I think people, from what I gather, are enjoying it, continue to enjoy it. So.
But you seem really hype about it, and I'm definitely intrigued. I think I would definitely be up for doing one at some point. So I'm
almost like tempted that you go without me, because it's like there's something to be said about like I don't know, like I didn't know anyone, and I found it but I found it really welcoming and fun. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else wants to give it a go, and let me know. Like, please do let me know about what you think about it, right? And I'll go when I have the opportunity, basically, as well. So,
yeah, I mean, I think obviously time restrictions are true for everyone. So another question I had, like functionally how it works. Is there like a session 0? Is there like a thing with like, say, you and Ollie where you kind of meet up and talk for your character? Or is that all just done through?
I did that through Facebook and stuff. Facebook, right? And it was a very brief conversation.
Sure. So you don't have. There's not a huge setup time, is what I'm like.
No. I forgot to mention the photos. Right. I didn't. There was something, like yeah. I missed something in one of the pictures, and I'm not mad at that. Like I could be like, oh man, like why didn't they make that more obvious or whatever? But I love the fact it was information that they gave to me, and the game outplayed me, and I love that. I'm like, I should have been more conscious by all the information. There's a small amount of information I'm given about what happened. I should be on that and like take more care in really looking through it and working out exactly what it all means.
So you are given like a player packet, if you like, essentially that has like this.
There's a PDF on the website. And that has the kind of character archetypes, but also like a bit of backstory about like locations and people and things like that. Like it's a brief overview. A lot of LARPs do them. Actually, a lot of the smaller LARPs will give you these like PDF documents, very similar to that, basically.
Yeah, I think it sounds really, really good fun, and I think it's something that I will give a go. Sure. I think it's. I mean. You seemed so excited about it when you came back off it. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, man, I could dig this quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, a lot of my kind of awkward preconceptions before going to normal LARP were the same, like, judgy preconceptions about going to this, right? What if I'm stuck with the wrong group of people? What if it's so cringe? What if it's all this, right? Like those worries that I had before I went to Empire, and the same thing happened again. Those melt away very, very quickly once you engage with the game and start having fun. So that's what I'd say. If you're kind of feeling that way about it, I would urge you to just give it a crack.
I think
you're stuck inside in COVID. What are you doing? What are you doing?
I think a lot of that stuff, though, is like, in a way, is an expression of your own sort of insecurity, almost kind of going into it. Like your nerves kind of sometimes make you kind of come up, like they bring up that barrier. Oh, what if it is cringy? And it's almost like a layer of your own nerves going into it. I sometimes.
Think totally. Or you don't feel like you're part of the group and being carried along in the story, right? Yeah. Like you don't want to feel like outside of the group just watching it. But I think there was something.
I think there is that fear of joining an established thing sometimes and not being clued up. But it sounds like that definitely didn't happen, and you were really quickly welcomed into it all and kind of embraced.
Very much so. I think maybe that's something to do with the character as well that I played, because it doesn't matter whether Charlie knows shit or not. He can just be Charlie his whole way through it, so that doesn't matter. I think like you might feel pressure from sorcerers about lore and things like that, maybe, but I think message them, put groups on there, like the people that I played with, and the general vibe I get off the whole Facebook thing is very inclusive, very welcoming. Informed it's being made right now. I don't feel like I'm walking into something that is there's lore, books and nation of Ollie and the world he's creating. And
it could be entirely new people. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's another pirate.
Well, it's like, what happens if I bump into Robert again, right? Like, are we gonna feud? Right? Like, is this gonna be a problem, right? Because people aren't talking to you the way you want to. I'll go with an open heart, go with an open mind, and give it a crack. Basically, at worst, it's a couple watching some nerds explore a really fun story. At worst, that's one thing I'll say to it. So,
and for tenor, what have you got to lose as well? Like, it's really not a lot. Right, like nothing. There is a degree of what you put in is what you get out, right? You have to engage. And you can kind of, not in a kind of a deceitful kind of way or anything like that, but you can experiment with the idea of just being like, for example, with Talis in Empire, right? What's it like to have Ian be in command of a group, right, and be the leader, right? Which isn't naturally necessarily the role that I fill, maybe, but it's also then like, maybe I am a
We could go hard out into this where I'm like talking about how life gives you roles, right? Like if you're a manager of a shop, you play the manager of a shop, right? Like you're still confined to certain boundaries by everything that goes along with that. So you might not have any chance to explore what it would be like to be the CEO or the shelf stacker, right? Like whatever. I don't know.
It's also that aspect of that sometimes you are in a way a different version of yourself with different people. Like you are different with your parents, you're different with maybe one group of friends, maybe different with a different group of friends, with co-workers. Do you act differently? And it's not necessarily, none of these things are a deceit. They're just different
but they're giving you
experiences that have kind of created, they've kind of, you've fallen into certain groups depending on whatever the dynamic of those individual groups are.
I agree, and I think but I think we can start the stories that the world around us tell us about ourselves. We can start to believe after a long time, right? Yeah. Like if anyone's been unemployed for a long period of time, knows what like feeling utterly crap because of your station within society feels like, right? Like I remember very distinctly, I was unemployed for it was a long time. It was just after 2008, and I just got back into the UK, and it was awful. And I was stuck, and I was unemployed. I got turned down for a job at Domino's Pizza, right? Like this is how desperate I was for work, and no one would hire me. And I remember I got a job, and I remember feeling like someone asked me, like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I said this job title that I was now doing, and that weird sense of, well, I haven't changed at all. I'm still the person I was when I was unemployed, but now I'm really proud of this job title. I think in a roundabout way, LARP can allow us to do that, right? We can start to play a role of someone that maybe we want to be, or parts of ourselves that we want to explore and expand that maybe we've been limited by in the rest of our world.
And you can break down those things as well, I'm very happy with my current life, but I can also break down various things and explore them in a character. Like, what is it like to have these kind of a tragic backstory?
And I think that's like massively, and I think that's one of the big kind of things that people get wrong about fantasy. And we don't need to view like you don't need to have anything wrong or feel like there's anything wrong to want to explore these and develop your character. You don't need a reason to you don't need, let me put it this way, you can be a free person within normal society, right? Where you don't give a fuck about what anyone else thinks of you and you're a strong, independent person, but you can still explore a whole bunch of yourself by playing LARP. It's not something like there's no defect in you for having to want to explore this stuff. You can just play it and explore it and have fun.
Well, I mean, and as we keep coming back to it is this idea of play and the idea of acting, playing, all these different things and all these different kind of ways of self-expression. I mean, there's something just core and healthy that is part of it that is involved in the human psyche in some way. It's sort of,
dude, I think when you start speaking this way as well, like I was speaking to a few people at work about LARP, and I don't often talk about LARP, but it comes up occasionally, right? They were talking to me about it, and I was just like, I was talking basically a few of the key points that we were just talking about there, how it's kind of fun just to explore other sides of your personality. It's a bit like improv theater with rules is a good way to describe LARP sometimes. But I think it really resonates with people. Like once you start explaining it, like even like kids role play all the time and they stop. I don't know why we stop. Like in a safe, good environment, I think there's something really healthy and it can be self-affirming or self-enlightening by doing it. So I certainly don't think there's any harm from doing it. Let me put it that way, right? Like on the flip side of this, like I don't people's apprehension about LARP and roleplay is often now quite odd to me, right? Like, I think it's a lot more natural than you think it is.
I mean, I think we do caveat a lot of this is, as with all things, there are unhealthy ways of dealing with these things and expressing yourself in these ways, and just basically just don't be a dick is the classic line. If you're not being a dick, generally, just give good vibes and make a good experience for people.
Also, like if you are dealing with serious, like actual serious mental health stuff or things like that professionals are better at that, right? That's not what you should be there. We're talking about a lot more of a kind of
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think like a degree of self-awareness is always necessary whenever approaching any of these kind of things. What is your degrees of tolerance, whatever it is that you're going to engage in, and what do you want to engage in? Ultimately, it's a pursuit of happiness, right? For yourself, for those around you,
it's a shared activity, right? It's a social thing. I think that's maybe something that I really enjoyed about it as well, was this kind of group thing that was so lacking in our lives during COVID, is to have this kind of like big group experience, especially with strangers, to be honest, because like, me and you talk regularly online and things like this, but how often are you coming into contact with people that aren't people that you work with or within your social bubble? It's nice to meet some more people.
I think that is actually a needed thing as well. Like, I am quite a loner, and I am quite, to be honest with you, I tend to cope okay during all of this kind of stuff. It hasn't really impacted me that heavily, and I'm quite fortunate in that way, just the way I'm wired probably. But at the same point, I think there is something very nice about just, putting yourself in positions where you may encounter someone and you may have to have a conversation, and it's not something where, oh, that's David, I know him, we have this history. It's nice to have those kind of opportunities to interact with new people. I think that's a very human thing as well.
Totally. And on that wholesome note, I think we should wrap it there, because we're definitely getting off topic and
massively off topic. No, look, I think thank you for telling me about it. You seemed so excited when you came back from doing it, and I think it sounds like a fantastic project.
Yeah, this is a few days old now, so I was like, my hype levels were.
Yeah, you were jamming, dude. You were loving it.
Totally buzzing afterwards, like absolutely buzzing. Thank you to Ollie for making the game and having me along, and thank you very much to all the other players that I played with. You guys were a hoot. We should also say thank you very much to our patrons for sticking with us during COVID. I mean, we're still putting out episodes slowly but surely.
Also, thank you to everyone who turned up to the New Year's event. I know that maybe there were some technical issues when we were doing it, but we all had a good time, and it seemed like people who were there had a good time. It was a good laugh, and I think
as for it, and the podcast is, if you're getting anything out of the podcast during lockdown, believe me, we're getting it tenfold back. Your support during this time really means a lot to us. The fact people are still downloading it and still enjoying it, it definitely gives us drive and motivation to keep on plugging on.
It's crazy to think that you guys can bear to listen to us for so long, to be honest. I mean, the amount of waffle that I come out with. But no, so thank you so much, everybody, and I really hope that you all have an amazing new year. And
an amazing 2020's done, people. It's done. All right,
it's in the can.
We're going to wrap up whatever the last of what 2020 gave us, and then we'll get on with the rest of this century, So
who knows what's next, but we'll be doing stuff, and hopefully, be something that you guys can listen
to. We shall LARP again.
Yeah, we shall LARP again. Dude.
Right, well, strength to the Empire.
Strength to Navarre.
It's here. You'll probably only get one shot, so make it count. Steady. Steady. Now, shoot! Quickly, after it. Blast! It's gone. Damn fine shooting on your part, though. Look here. It's blood. If it bleeds, we can kill it.